I'm reflecting right now on the book The Ethics of Money Production by Holzman, and he makes a number of really compelling ethical arguments about the corruption of money in that book. Um, specifically saying that the monopolization of money production is almost equivalent to voter fraud, is one point that he makes, because if you're the cantillionaire that's nearest the spigot, well, it doesn't matter that you only have one vote. You're enriching yourself at the expense of others. So it's a way to disproportionately increase your influence on society despite the voting mechanism. Another point, this one's very obvious to libertarians, but it's amazing to me how many people don't understand this. Fiat currency inflation is everywhere and always only a violation of private property. Right? That's all it can do. If you're printing money and giving it to someone else, then you're stealing, as you said, the guy in the back of the queue is being stolen from by the guy at the front of the queue, right? This is the Cantillon effect. There's no equitable economic benefit whatsoever from printing money or engaging in inflation. So if I look at that and then I reflect back further on the Magna Carta, when King John signed it in 1215, life, liberty, inviolable property, right? This was foundational to the idea of, I guess you'd call it a free market government, right? This is a government that serves the people and really should just seek to preserve and promote life, liberty, and property. Anything a government does beyond that it's outside the scope of what a government is intended to do. So my question is, if we look at, I guess, so in your opinion, to what degree has the corruption of money contributed to the buildup of political corruption or the corruption of our social hierarchies? And then if something like, I'm obviously a huge Bitcoin proponent, I often describe it as incorruptible money, right? It's money you can't print. So in theory, it should prevent a lot of this systemic theft that leads to this buildup of the public sector, right? Disproportionate to the private sector. To what degree do you think incorruptible money can help clean up the corruption in our political and social hierarchies?
Well, enormously, certainly, enormously. Let me just take you back to the administration of Lord Salisbury in the 1890s, when British Empire was at its zenith, and it was towards the end of the first phase of the Industrial Revolution. It was the most successful administration in the history of the Conservative Party, or possibly, one argues, Great Britain. Now, Lord Salisbury, funnily enough, if you look at pictures of him with his big bushy beard, and he was from a family of many generations of aristocrats. He was a libertarian. I could give you a number of quotes, but I'll give you one in particular. He said, "It's only the business of Parliament is to facilitate the entrepreneurial spirit of the Englishman. It's not there to regulate him or do anything. It's there to just facilitate." And this is when income tax was sort of about 5p in the pound, and the tax burden was 1/10 of what it is today. And when it came to health and safety and all that moral type of stuff, he said it's every free-born Englishman's right to get as drunk as he likes, whenever he likes. It's no business of anybody else. He was a true libertarian, and we had an extremely successful administration. And of course, it was on the gold standard. You come off the gold standard when you go to war. Coming off the gold standards to facilitate war. So we came off the gold standard to fight the Napoleonic Wars. We went back on it, and it was very successful. We came off it again in 1914. The Americans rather foolishly developed their central bank in 1913 and came into that war in 1917. The Vietnam conflict was the same. That's why Nixon closed the gold window. He wanted to fund a war. It's about war. Mm-hmm. And we also know, do we not, that wars never work. Nobody ever gets anything from a war. Nobody ever really gets anything from a war. One of the things that I am as well as a city worker, I'm a graduate of the Royal College of Defence Studies, so I'm actually trained in geopolitical strategy as well. It's a string, one of the strings to my bow. And my dissertation that I needed to come to there was the economic implications of warfare, which is another little booklet I've written some time ago now, but the principle's just the same. Nobody gets to win out of war. It just doesn't happen. Some wars are necessary. Occasionally, I'm not a pacifist. Some wars are necessary. If somebody invades the United States, it is legitimate to go to war. If somebody invades Great Britain, it's legitimate to go to war. It is not legitimate to go to war the other side of the globe because you want to change the regime. That is not legitimate because little people have to pay for it. And of course, the people who like to do this are safe in the knowledge that they won't have to go. So the Washington neocons sit there sending young men to war, confident that they're not going to get their head shot off. They're all right. So it doesn't matter whether it's Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, and all the rest of it, they're safe. And they've probably got call options on Raytheon, Lockheed, and all the other warfare manufacturers. And it's no, I'm not making a pop at America. It's no different here. No different here. Who wins out of war? And the people who win out of war, people who actually manufacture war material. No young men gain from it. They just get killed and maimed. So it's all about warfare. And of course, in America, $1 trillion annual budget for military is disgusting. There's no other word for it. It's disgusting. 11 aircraft carrier groups, 800 overseas bases, 200,000 odd overseas military personnel. What the hell's it for? And it's borrowed money. It's borrowed money. The whole thing's disgraceful, but it's the same people running it in Washington. And all this, I heard all about this. Let's clean the swamp. Let's drain the swamp. Nobody's draining the swamp. They're not draining it here. We're no better. We're just on a very much smaller scale. We're just on a small scale. But the corruption is there. The desire for warfare is the same. Why have we got NATO? What's the point of NATO? The Warsaw Pact countries disappeared. They went years ago. What's NATO for? Never mind what's NATO expanding for, right up to the Russian border. Who cares about... Look, I know this might annoy some people, but nobody really cares about the Ukraine and the Russian Federation. It's got nothing to do with us. It's nothing to do with us. And in the old days of Lord Palmerston and Lord Castlereagh in the mid-19th century, we never went to war unless it affected Great Britain directly. We didn't dabble in other wars. We didn't dabble in other wars. Think what America would do if it wasn't spending $1 trillion a year, what they could do with that money if it wasn't being poured down the lavatory of warfare. It's absolutely disgraceful. I haven't seen anybody. I've got friends. I've got a lot of American friends, right? A lot of American friends. And because of my background, some in the military. And I speak to them. I'm talking about fast jet pilots. I'm talking about one-star generals who I was at college with and stuff like that, military college and stuff. And I speak to them. They have absolutely no idea why they've got it. They couldn't explain to me why they're doing all this. They don't have a reason. They don't have a rationale. And if you ask what the war aims are, if you talk to them about war aims, they don't know what the war aim is. What was the war aim in Libya, the Horn of Africa, Syria, Afghanistan? They don't know. They just stare at it. And they're not morons. It's only just because of that little bit of their brain doesn't actually ask any questions. They just bigger budgets. The CIA, most of it unaudited. Not audited. They don't know where the money goes in the Pentagon. It's just loads and loads and loads of money. And something America's got to address, because at the moment they're still hanging on by the fingernails to the leadership of the free world. I don't give it more than a few years before. It's all about economics. If America isn't strong economically, you can have all the aircraft carriers in the world. It's going to make no difference.
Yeah, it's heavy. And how can the U.S. be the leader of the free world when it is so blatantly violating the property rights of its citizens to fund all these far-flung imperial escapades? It's hypocritical to the core. You know, I think Rothbard said something like this too, that taxation is theft, war is mass murder, conscription is slavery. And so I don't know. I've in a lot of my work, I've come to really just the incentives to warfare, right? The economic incentives seem to be the driver. So to the degree that we can reduce the profitability of warfare, seems to be the only way to try and constrict it. And that's another area that I'm very hopeful for something like Bitcoin, right? If the more people hold Bitcoin, institutions, organizations, it's just money that's hard to steal. And the harder money is to steal, the less incentive there is to conflict, really.